Hi, everyone. So, my name is Dr. Kodam Thara, and I am basically using this opportunity to introduce you to myself as well as to this class. And this is essentially a how to into um, doing the assignments, into taking notes, how to read the textbook, how to prepare for the exam, how to actually answer the short answer questions, all of that stuff. So, what we're going to do is essentially talk about what to expect from the class and all of that good stuff. So, make sure that you are paying attention. And of course, anytime during the semester, if you have questions about any of these things, you can always come back to this little Google slide presentation and take a look at any of these slides and you can see it for yourself. So let's get to all of this basic stuff. And this is information that you can find on the course homepage, which is also our syllabus. This is how to get in touch with me. So if you want to ask me just a basic information about the class, or if you have questions about the course information or even about content, you can email me directly. That's my email address, sanu.kodamthara@swasu.edu. Or you can use Canvas to get in touch with me. Canvas has, of course, a messaging component. And sometimes if you have trouble with Canvas, you may not be able to get in touch with me that way. And if that's the case, emailing me directly is probably the easiest way to get in contact with me. Um, Email is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. I check my email all the time. But in terms of my response rate, I try to get back in contact with people within the next 24 to 48 hours. If I do not get uh, in touch with you within that time period, please email me again. Usually, what ends up happening is I get caught up in things, I get really busy, and I will forget to reply. So please email me again. Please keep in mind that I have usually 4 or 5 other classes. And so that gets to around 200 students, 150 to 200 other students per semester. And so, because of that, there are a lot of reasons why I will forget to reply. I try to stay on top of things, but just in case I don't respond to your message, please feel free to contact me again, and I will respond to you. Now, if you want to meet with me in person, you are more than welcome to. My office is in the Science Building on campus in Weatherford. The building that you see there on screen, that's the Science Building. I am actually in the basement. My office is in the basement. So I will actually, you know what? I'm going to use my little magic pen here. So if you go down this little area here, that's you'll if you go into that area, you will see doors that go into, yeah, they hide us in the basement. They don't want people to see us. So that is actually the basement of the building. And the building has 3 levels. So the basement is technically the first floor. And so when we talk about when you can find me, first of all, my office is in an office suite. So the office suite number is 101, and you'll find me in the back corner in 101E. And my office hours for the spring semester are Monday and Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I will actually be working off campus, but I will be available via Zoom. And you'll notice that on Canvas, on our homepage, I have I have a meeting ID. So when you log into Zoom, which you have Zoom capabilities through SWOSU. You can log into Zoom and type in the meeting ID that I have posted on Canvas. There's one specifically for Tuesdays and one specifically for Thursdays. You'll log in and it'll automatically send you to a waiting room. And if I'm not meeting with another student, what'll happen is I will just admit you in, and you and I will meet and chat about whatever it is that concerns you, and that's it. So essentially, it's like us meeting face to face, except it's via Zoom. Fridays, it's by appointment only. Usually, what I'm doing is Thursday afternoons and Fridays, I'm working on research. I have a research project that I'll be taking on beginning in the spring semester, and so what I'm hoping to do is using that time for my own research. But I have no problem scheduling a time to meet with you. Um, via Zoom or even on campus if necessary. So just let me know what day and time works best for you. I know that many of you do work, and so work obligations or other obligations do get in the way. And so if we've got to meet another time, that is not a problem. Okay, so let's get into the actual class itself and the expectations that you might have. And I know that all of you, if not most of you, at least, are taking this class because you have to take it. It's a general education requirement. Also, technically in Oklahoma, it is legally required. So I want to talk about how to succeed in this class. And the thing is that I know that many of you are under the impression that this is going to be um, just like in high school, where you can just memorize things, and as long as you memorize well, you're okay. That's not how I approach teaching US history, even in the online version. This is going to be very lecture heavy. It is going to be reading heavy. It's going to be writing heavy because that's what we do in history. And the thing is there is an expectation um, as a freshman history class to not only teach you about the narrative of US history. By that I mean teaching you about what actually happened in US history, but to also teach you the skills that come with being a historian. And that means teaching you how to think, read, and write like a historian. And those are critical thinking, critical reading, critical writing skills. And so there's a lot of work involved in this class. And so I want to be upfront and honest about that. And so one of the things that I do want to emphasize here is that if this is from the beginning, if this is something that you do not have time for, you need to really think about um, whether or not this is a class that is right for you, because you will spend a lot of time uh, on this class. You will spend a lot of time listening to lectures. You will spend a lot of time reading. You will spend a lot of time writing. This is heavily involved class, especially if you want to pass it, especially if you want to do well. I do not participate in, this whole idea of just passing out grades, right? I need you to demonstrate that you not only know the information, but that you can communicate the information, right? And it basically starts with how you pay attention to learning the information. So let's start with the whole process of how to take notes. So lecture. Let's start with how to access the lecture first of all. So in Canvas, you'll notice that on the left-hand side of the course page in Canvas, you'll notice something called the modules, which is how you accessed this Google Slides presentation in the first place. So in the modules, you'll notice that all of our units have been divided up. And in these units, each unit has been divided up into the separate lectures. And in the lecture is also a Google Slide presentation. And I go over each lecture according to how it's covered in the book, right? So the book and the lecture correlate. They are connected to each other, right? So when we're talking about, for example, uh, the book, of course, is Eric Foner's Give Me Liberty. And the first chapter that we cover is Reconstruction, which is chapter 15. And that is connected to the first lecture, right? So all of it is connected and correlated. And you are expected to pay attention to both. You've got to read the chapter as well as listen to the lecture. Um, just so you know, before we get into the details of how to take notes, just so you know, I have it set up to where the lectures are accessed through Canvas's app called Studio. And the reason why I have that is because Studio keeps track of whether or not you have accessed the lecture and how much of the lecture you have accessed. So I do know what you have watched, and that is important because I do want to know that you have been paying attention or that you have at least accessed the information. So when you play the lecture, first of all, take note of what is on the screen, right? The terms that I have highlighted on the screen are important. Make note of that. But make sure that those aren't the only things that you have written on the screen. Pay attention to the things that I'm emphasizing. So if on the screen, I have, noted, for example, radical Republicans, but that's all the only things that I have written. What is it that I'm saying about the radical Republicans? Identify who they are. Why am I talking so much about them? You don't have to write down every word that I'm saying, but just give yourself an idea of who they are and why they matter. Also, keep in mind that this is a recording, right? So you can the benefit to you is that you can write at your own pace, right? You don't have to yell at me to stop or slow down. You can pause when necessary. You can rewind. You can control the lecture as much as you want, right? So pause when necessary, control it so that you can access the information and use it to your advantage. Now, from the book, yes, you have to have the book. The book is a requirement for a couple of reasons. One, all of your assignments come from the book, so you're going to need it for homework. But two, and probably most importantly, the book complements the lecture and the lecture complements the book. So I'm working hand in hand with the book. So when we talk about the book, there are several times throughout all of the lectures where I will specifically mention what Professor Foner talks about in the book or what Professor Foner will explain in the book. So make note of those things so that when you do go look in the book, you'll know what he's talking about. In fact, I will make mention of those things so that you don't have to read every single thing, right? In fact, I want you to pay attention to the subheadings that he uses and the bolded terms that he highlights in the chapter, right? And throughout the book. But make sure that you know that you don't have to read and write everything. There are things in the chapters that you don't have to know unless you're absolutely interested, right? There's a lot of information out there. There are a lot of details, but we just don't have time, and that's okay. It's just so much information. Now, just so you know, Eric Foner is one of the greatest historians of American history. There, bar none. He is one of the greatest American historians. And it's just, I'm a huge fan of his. I have learned so much from his writings. So I am a huge fan. And it's with good reason that I chose this textbook and his writing. So if you choose to read the chapters, great, but you do not have to read everything. So read what I have talked to you about in the lecture, and read especially what I have mentioned to you about the book. Okay. So these are the things that I want you to take notes on, and make sure you spend the time to write these notes, right? Take the time. Don't take shortcuts in just writing the highlights on the screen, because that won't teach you anything. You want to be able to take the time to explain those things to yourself. Now, when it's time to prepare for exams, take the time to not just reread your notes, but rewrite those notes. It's like reteaching yourself all over again. It's reorganizing your thoughts and helping you to relearn all of that information, because it's a lot of information that you're processing. So you want to give yourself the time and the opportunity to relearn everything that you have gained. Okay. Um, if you've looked at the syllabus, and I encourage you to, if you haven't already, I encourage you to take the time to look at the syllabus. You'll notice that the homework assignment for our class will be referred to as primary source exercises. First of all, I want to explain what primary sources are. So, primary sources are what historians use to put together the narrative of the history that they are studying. So, primary sources are essentially any object or any item from the time period that we are studying. So, for example, when we talk about, let me go back for a second, when we talk about any time period, so let's say if we were studying the 1920s, and specifically we wanted to study the 1920s jazz age, and we wanted to study women during the jazz age, we could look at flappers, and maybe we would look at fashion, right? So we would want to look at their makeup, we'd want to look at their style of dress. So their dresses, their makeup, their shoes, the music, all of those different items would be considered primary sources. So literally those objects would be primary sources. If a young woman wrote in her diary about what it was like to be a flapper, her diary would be a primary source. If she wrote letters to her friends about how she went to a club and listened to jazz, those letters to her friend would be primary sources, right? So, literally, any item from that time period that we are studying would be considered a primary source. The photograph that you see on the screen is an example of a primary source. So you could see at the bottom of that photograph, it's labeled so that you can see what it says there. So it says here that this is from the Navy Yard in Boston, right? And it was taken on April 20th in 1929. And it's a picture of the USF Constitution, of the deck looking aft. And if you notice, right, clearly, and let me clear this screen here really quickly, and use a different uh, color here. But if you notice, it's clearly under construction, right? I mean, if you notice all of this wood here and there scattered about, just a few men around either something has happened to it or they're rebuilding it. But this is clearly under construction, but it's something from 1929. And this photograph would be a perfect example of a of a primary source, right? One of the things that you want to remember is that the purpose of a primary source is to give insight into how people lived, what they did, and why they lived that way, why they did the things that they did, why they believed the things that they believed, right? So the textbook plays a huge role in the primary source exercises, because in the textbook you will see two different types of inclusions, and those are Voices of Freedom and Who is an American. Those will be our resources for the primary source exercises. And so you have to have the textbook in order to do that. Now, if you buy the ebook, that's fine. But just so you know, the ebook will have different um, page numbers from what I include in the actual assignment. So bear that in mind. Okay. So Voices of Freedom and Who is an American. Now, in terms of how many there will be 4 different primary source exercises, one from each unit. And that's going to be important because it will correlate with sort of the theme of that particular unit. In terms of my expectations for each assignment, for each question that is asked, and usually there is 2 questions um, per assignment, and that's it, just 2 questions. Each question gets a paragraph. So we're talking about 4 or 5 sentences. Okay. So a paragraph. And in each paragraph, you will have to support your answer with a quote from the source. Because when we talk about what the source is, usually these sources are either a speech or an essay or even a pamphlet. So, what you'll do, in fact, there might even be sources that are songs or poems. But what you will do is you will find a quote from these sources to support your answer. The reason why I'm doing that is because using a quote to support your answer is demonstrating that you can link the source to your argument. You are demonstrating critical thinking. You are demonstrating a critical argument, right? That's how you prove that you've got the skills of critical thinking and critical writing. You are demonstrating that you understand not only what it means to be a historian, because that's not the goal here. It's just that you are able to put these things together, that you're not just coming up with answers, but that you can read a source, and then looking at the question, you can answer that question based on what you have read from the source. That's the goal. Okay? All right. So let's talk about the exams. So, first of all, there are 4 exams throughout the semester, 1 per unit. Okay. There is, as the syllabus will tell you, there is no comprehensive exam, nothing like that, just 1 exam per unit. Each exam is made up of 25 multiple choice questions and 5 short answer questions. Each multiple choice question is worth 2 points each, and each short answer question is worth 10 points each. So if you do the math, that's 50 points total for multiple choice and 50 points for the short answer. So here's the kicker. When we talk about this section right here, this short answer, This is where the money is, right? That's 10 points each, meaning you do not want to leave any of those questions blank. You want to make sure that every single question is answered. You want to demonstrate that you know this material, right? So let's talk about these short answer questions. First of all, the short answer questions are essentially how and why questions. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Okay. Now, what I want to explain to you is that I give each lecture a theme. So by that, I mean a theme uh, is designed to help you better understand what's going on during that particular era in American history. So, for example, in the lecture on, in the lecture on Reconstruction, it's all designed around the idea of rebuilding America. So you want to be able to explain or demonstrate that you have an understanding that this is an era designed or purposed around rebuilding America. And you want to be able to explain, okay, why do we need to rebuild America? What's the need behind or the purpose behind recreating America? And so you want to be able to explain that. And that means that you understand the context or the background behind, okay, well, there was a civil war and there was also racial issues and racial tensions. And even with a war fought and slaves freed, there are still problems and there is still struggles behind reuniting the country. And all of that is problematic. You also want to be able to demonstrate, and this gets to the purpose behind short answer questions. You want to be able to demonstrate that you have an understanding of the material. So even if you can't answer the question exactly as it's supposed to be answered, you want to be able to write about the topic in general. Okay. You want to be able to demonstrate some understanding. So, okay, maybe if the question is, for example, why did the country need to be rebuilt during the era of Reconstruction? You can then say, Reconstruction um, led to several amendments that allowed for African Americans to um, enjoy citizenship and voting rights, although temporary, because there was a moment of rebuilding. However, this was not long lived, reflecting a tension in race and um, continuing tensions between the North and the South. That's what you want to be able to demonstrate, is that you still have an understanding of the material, even though you can't quite explain every detail. In the end, what you want to do is take your time and work as hard as you can. But if you are struggling, if you are overwhelmed, if you have questions, if you are worried, please do not hesitate to ask me. Please do not hesitate to contact me. That's what I'm here for. So let me know. Let me know if you're worried. Let me know if you are overwhelmed. And let's talk it through together and let's figure it out together. And we'll get through the semester together.